You are listening to The Examine Life with Bram Levinson. So I want to welcome you to the first episode of the second season of The Examine Life with Bram Levinson. To be completely honest, I don't know what that means. I just know that this is what podcasts do. They operate in seasons. And the first season of the podcast was 45 episodes. I'm, guessing that the second will be the same. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along. I have to say that there have been moments when I have considered the fact that there is very low production value to my podcast. When I first launched it, I was getting emails from people all over the world, from different organizations, offering to help produce the podcast, help increase the sound quality, and they would send me samples of what it could sound like, and there was like a before and an after, and every time I listened to the after, I didn't understand what the hell the difference was between the original and the one that they had tweaked. So I very quickly deleted all of those emails, and very quickly also sort of wrote all of that stuff off, and decided that, if I'm going to be telling people not to compare themselves or what they do to anyone else, then I'm going to do the same thing. I basically have just tuned out all of the information that I have that I've gleaned or been exposed to over the years about other podcasts and what their intro sounded like and what their outro sounded like and what they were doing. Because to be honest, I don't care. I'm not interested in doing someone else's podcast. I'm interested in this being an authentic expression for me to reach you and to do it in a way that, means something to me and is genuine and is, again, authentic. So, with all that said, season 2 of this podcast is being kicked off with, as you've already noticed, a new intro theme. And I'm going to get into that at the end of this episode. I'm going to sort of explain how that came to be. But I figured that what better time for a new beginning than in a moment in time where it seems like we are being ushered into a new beginning. Basically, what I think, the way I've been sort of perceiving everything is I think in terms of Hinduism, and I think in terms of Hindu mythology, and I have been reading and studying and teaching about gods and goddesses that have represented certain ages in civilization, and there are gods who are there to oversee what's going on in any different or in any given age, and there are those that are there to end an age and other gods to usher in a new age. And I believe that on a very spiritual level, what is happening is one age has ended and another is beginning. And so to respect that and to be in alignment with that, I felt like what better opportunity for me to not only use that whole season thing that podcasts seem to be doing, than to do it now, but also what better opportunity for me to put a spin on this, because a lot of people seem to be, first of all, there's just a lot of crazy out there. There's so much crazy that's being reported. There's so much bullshit that's being launched out all over the place. If I had a penny for everybody who's been sending me conspiracy theories about where this virus came from, and what country is responsible, and what country that country wants to take down with this virus. I mean, you know what? I don't know what's true and I don't know what's not. I haven't, and even if I had evidence, I still wouldn't believe it's true, because I don't believe anything to be true unless it's literally right in front of me. But you know what? It doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't give a shit. Okay? I don't care where it came from. I don't care who started it. I don't care what their political agenda may or may not be. I don't care. The fact of the matter is, this is what we're dealing with right now. And because this is what we're dealing with right now, we have to deal. Okay? So let's deal. Let's do that together. As a group, as a collective, as a community, let's just do it together. So, with that said, and no disrespect to anybody who has sent me, these conspiracy theories and emails and whatever, but in all seriousness, you don't need to. I'm not paying attention to them. It means nothing to me, and you don't need me to back up what you believe to be true. Okay, I just want to put that out there. I just need to be real. But for me, this is a new beginning. I think that what we're going to see over the next year, maybe even longer, is a new way of being, a new way of operating in the world, a new way of living. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. If anything, it shows us that we, had certain practices that we were used to. We had a way of life that we were used to. And that way of life was, for lack of a better term, and many of you know that I don't like this word because it gets thrown around willy-nilly, but we were blessed. We had it easy. We did not have to think about how close we were standing next to somebody else, and we didn't have to consider whether or not we could go to our friend's place and not only hang out with them or have a meal with them or share a bottle of wine with them or have a cup of tea with them, but we also didn't, sometimes if you went over and you mistook their glass for your glass and drank from their glass, you would be like, oh shit, okay, I drank from your glass, here's your glass back, there's mine. You wouldn't have to think about it. And so these are things that potentially we will have to think about. Right now, we are definitely thinking about it. But all that to say that there is a new age that is unfolding in front of us. And there are so many incredible ways to approach this. And there's so many incredible ways to navigate it. And for me, this has been a series of firsts. This whole experience has been a series of firsts. And I'm going to get into those later on in the episode. But for me, that's sort of how I've been approaching this. Is okay, I'm being given sort of a canvas right now. And what am I going to paint on that canvas? I'm not going to pay attention to what other people are painting on their canvases, not too much anyway, because I don't want that to affect the art that I create or the reality that I create for myself. But nonetheless, for me, this has been a real opportunity, and not just something that was voluntary, but it has been an opportunity to almost allow myself to accept, first of all, to accept that this is going on, and then to allow myself to be thrust into a position where I either had to get on board with newness and firsts, or I would be, fighting, to be honest, to be fighting what is, and ultimately suffering. One of the things that I did this week was I gave a webinar. Friends of mine own a company in Montreal, a CrossFit company, and they had asked me to give a webinar for their clients that basically brought the theory or the concept of coaching out of specifically the physical to life, giving them a sort of a life coaching webinar, specifically on how to navigate this moment in time. And the webinar was all about how to manage isolation and create structure, given the situation that we find ourselves in. And for me, it was the most natural thing in the world to do. And it was really, really well received. And I wanted to share with you all some of the things that I had imparted, some of the, tricks, hacks, tools I had imparted to that gang. And this was really how to manage isolation. I don't know if you all have found your rhythm yet. I definitely have found my rhythm. For me, the new normal has settled in. I'm very comfortable. Whatever struggles I had in the beginning of this that were associated to fear or that were associated to, paranoia, and I don't mean that in terms of a, doomsday kind of thing, but, there were moments where I found myself paranoid outside. I found myself, as I said before in a previous episode of the podcast, it would only be normal if we didn't find ourselves breathing normally when we were outside, given that we've been told that this virus is a respiratory threat. And so, there were moments where I was, walking down the street or walking down the sidewalk and trying to keep a distance from whoever was coming my way. But sometimes it wasn't 2 meters. And all of a sudden I would find myself holding my breath, that kind of paranoia. So I have found myself really settling into comfort, which is always my goal, to find comfort in the uncomfortable. And I even have been able to redefine what's going on around us as not being uncomfortable. It just is. So I wanted to share a couple of things with you about certain things that we can keep doing to stay healthy in mind and body and spirit, Some of these I have alluded to in previous episodes of the podcast, but I wanted to really get it down for you all so that it's succinct, and that you can maybe pause the episode of the podcast and take notes if that's helpful for you and if you feel so inclined, really. The first thing I want to say is I want you to identify whether or not this kind of thing that I'm about to say is something that you want to get on board with. Okay? Because frankly, there's so many people talking so much shit out there, and they're talking about what we should do and what we shouldn't do and how we can manage this and how we can't manage it. If you're already annoyed with all that stuff, turn off the episode of the podcast, really. Or just, like fast forward to the end. Because I get it. I totally get it. There's so many people with so many opinions. Everyone believes that they're a reporter, amplifying vibrations that potentially have brought them to a place of suffering, but yet they feel the need to report on whatever that issue is or whatever that news bite is. So much shit that we don't know where it's coming from. So many posts and memes. We don't know what the metadata is encoded in those memes. We don't know who's responsible for them. And listen, I've been pretty guilty. I've been posting so many memes that are funny. I find them really funny because I want to inspire. I want to make sure that I'm maintaining that positioning of being a source of laughter and inspiration and uplifting energy throughout all this. With that said, I don't know who created a lot of these memes. I created one of them, but the rest of them I didn't. And so for all I know, I'm, as guilty as the next person of sort of passing on someone else's encoded information so that they steal all my information. You know what? I don't care. Whatever. Take it. I have nothing to hide. You want my information? Fucking take it. I don't care. So the first piece of advice I'm going to give you is identify whether or not you want to listen to this. Okay? The second thing I'm going to say is identify how much information is too much information for you. Now, I've alluded to this in past episodes, but you may notice that there is information coming at us from all sides all the time. If this is bringing you into a place of suffering, and suffering is going to be, I suppose the signs of suffering are going to be made present when you start to feel sensations or emotions or have thoughts that are starting to ricochet around in your mind that don't leave the body feeling good. Okay? So if you are getting a lot of anxiety from the stuff that you're plugged into, it's time to unplug. Doing so doesn't make you irresponsible. Doing so means that you are prioritizing your experience over the experience that exists in the changing landscape. And the reason why I'm using that term again, changing landscape, is because this situation is changing hour to hour. So what someone has reported a week ago may not even be valid anymore. So what's the point in plugging into all of it? As I think I've said before, I plug into the news twice a day, first thing in the morning and then in the evening, not before I go to sleep, but in the evening, just so that I'm somewhat informed. That's it. I don't need more than that. You can call me whatever you want to call me. I couldn't give a shit. It's exactly the way I need to navigate it, and hopefully that inspires you to navigate it in a similar way that works for you. Number 3. Make sure that you are managing or respecting a good balance between discipline and structure and ease and comfort, which means that in any given day, you are spending a certain amount of hours doing things that would fall under the responsibility umbrella, and then you're doing a certain amount of things during the day that would fall under the chill out umbrella. Okay, you want a good balance between being responsible and taking care of shit that needs to get taken care of. You're also being responsible with giving yourself the downtime that your nervous system desperately needs. Everyone is living under, I would call it a lower level, or maybe not so lower level, anxiety right now. And it's only normal that you're tired. It's only normal that you don't have as much attention to focus. This is normal. So you need more rest, and you may find yourself already sleeping more, which is a great thing. Okay, so make sure that there's not too much lethargy, because if there is, you may be prone to fear and anxiety. Make sure that there isn't too much structure or discipline, because you may burn out very quickly. Number 4, get physical exercise daily. Get your heart rate up, work your muscles, exercise your lung capacity, deep breaths, and at the end of it all, stretch the body out. If it's not like a yoga practice or whatever, any practice that stretch the body out at the end of it. Number 5, figure out what you're going to control. I also alluded to this in a previous episode. figure out what you are going to have control over, whether that be, whatever the process is that you respect when you bring groceries into your house, whether it's how you're going to manage your meals, or if you're going to cook, or that kind of thing. You need to have a sense of control over something, especially in a moment in time where there is a lot that is beyond our control. Okay? Now, what I do want to say about that is, if you are not living alone and you have decided that you are going to control, let's say, how you bring food into your place, don't panic or treat others with, aggression or condescension when it seems like they aren't on the same page as you are as to how that's going to go, or if it doesn't seem like they're in as much control as you are. I know for me, I was raised in an obsessive compulsive cleaning household as a kid. And consequently, I'm very clean. I'm very, very, very clean. And I vacuum 2-3 times a day, but that's also because I have a dog who sheds like there's a contest to see how much hair she can lose in one day. But nonetheless, you want to make sure that if the person you live with or the people you live with aren't on the same level as you are in terms of controlling whatever you want to control, whether it's cleaning or whether it's, whatever you attribute discipline to or as being, make sure that you don't lash out at those people. Okay. We really do want to practice compassion, because right now everybody is entitled to internalize and allow whatever they're internalizing to inform their behavior. Everybody's allowed to do that in their own way, and we really shouldn't be judging them. Number 6, get outside once a day, even if it's just for a walk up and down your block. Staying inside can create a fear of going out. And listen, the things that we're going to be left with on the other side of this whole situation, we don't want to add agoraphobia to that list. Okay? It's important that we remember that there is an outside world, that it is not solely dangerous, and it's not even that dangerous if we understand what the practices are that we should be putting in place in order to be safe. Number 7, eat healthy food that is rich in nutrients and vitamins and minerals. Eat whole food. You don't want to eat dead food. You don't want to eat food that has no vitality to it, like anything deeply fried, chips. I know they're good, but you don't want to eat too much of that. And for God's sake, avoid sugar. Sugar is a killer, because holy addiction. Sugar creates an addiction for more sugar. Sugar also lowers the immune system. That is one of the reasons why I cut it out years ago. And right now, we want to keep the immune system as healthy and boosted as possible. Now, number 8, drink copious amounts of water. Stay hydrated. Okay, stay hydrated to the point where you are peeing constantly. The best news I can give you is that you are as close to the bathroom or bathrooms that you are the most comfortable in as you ever have been, because you ain't going nowhere. So you can go to the bathroom 75 times a day. Keep drinking water. Number 9, speak to your people at least once a day, but don't go overboard with it. And what I mean by that is maintain the contacts you have. Maintain the contact with the people you have in your life, those connections. But if you feel tired quicker after speaking to a couple of people or even one person, respect that. Okay, and give yourself alone time. I know that there have been days where I found that I wasn't in the mood to speak to anybody. And in those days, I gave myself the luxury of not talking to anybody. And I think it's important that we respect that, because the last thing we want to do is end up in the same conversation over and over and over again. What you can also do is, if you do want to speak to people, but you really don't want to talk about the situation we're in so that it doesn't overshadow every other aspect of being a human being, you can say to them, listen, let's chat. Let's see if we can figure out what we can talk about that doesn't really have to do with this situation. Maybe that would be helpful for you. Number 10, keep your environment clean. And this isn't coming from my place of OCD. There's an actual reason for this. Doing so is going to help you feel that you can control your environment. As I've spoken before, it's super important. But it's also going to keep your space free of visual noise that might be distracting to you. Okay. As well, if you have a lot of cleaning to do, but you don't do it, that might weigh on you. Okay. It might sort of weigh on your conscience and keep you from being able to focus on whatever else you're doing. So make sure that the environment is clean so that there's nothing that you have to get to that you're not getting to, that you don't feel like you're procrastinating, and ultimately so that there's no visual noise around you. Now, this leads into number 11. Focus on what you're doing, one thing at a time. Practice mindfulness. This is massively essential right now in a moment where the mind can get pulled into a million different places, most of which can be fear-inducing. You want to focus on what you're doing as you're doing it. If you are getting dressed, focus on getting dressed. Pay attention to the details. Pay attention to the buttons on your shirt. Pay attention to the zipper on your pants, your jeans. If you're brushing your teeth, try only brushing your teeth. I want you to notice how difficult it is to stay focused on one action that you're doing. This is actually going to be really, really helpful because it's going to help keep you cognitively concentrated on one thing. And the more you do that, the less likely you are to get pulled into every other thing. Okay, so this is like a muscle that we're going to start to flex. This is about sort of conditioning the mind to think in a way that is helpful. Now, I spoke about mindfulness. I want to talk about meaningfulness. And I think I've spoken about it before in a previous episode of the podcast. Meaningfulness, the practice of finding meaning and value in seemingly random and uncontrollable situations. This is something that I do all the time. I am constantly looking for the invisible ties that bind everything together. I'm looking for the why. I'm looking for how has this all unfolded in the oddest of perfect ways. And I'm talking about the situation we're in. How is this perfect? What can I learn from this? What corrections do I feel compelled to make in my life because of the situation that we find ourselves in? Again, I've alluded to this in a past episode. How is this situation presenting me with opportunities? Well, firstly, it is helping me deal with the concept of helplessness. After I gave the webinar this week, somebody asked a question in the Q&A afterwards about how to work with the helplessness that she felt at not really being able to do anything to help this situation. And what I spoke to her about was finding something that she was passionate about and then either directing funding towards that or working in her community to maybe create a system that wasn't already in place that would then either speak to that either organization or that movement that she would like to be a part of, or to simply create a new movement of her own that would help her feel like she is best using her time to be as productive as possible so that she is affecting positive change, not just within the confines of the environment and the situation we find ourselves in, but for other people. You know, when we help other people, we alleviate our own suffering. So the concept of helplessness is a really, really important one. And I think that we realize that in being able to control something, we alleviate whatever sense of helplessness we might have. But as I spoke about at the beginning of this episode, this opportunity, and it really is an opportunity, this situation has been all about meaningfulness for me. And what I've noticed from the beginning is that I've been thrust into certain situations where I have to educate myself quickly in order to be able to keep up and to be of service. And what that meant was, from the get-go, I decided I was going to be giving these group meditation classes. And I started by doing it on Skype. I had never done a group call on Skype, if you can believe it. And so I very quickly had to educate myself on how to do that. That very quickly transferred into using Zoom because Skype was so glitchy and I really wanted things to run as seamlessly as possible when I was giving a meditation. But really, this has been there have been so many firsts over the past 5 weeks of forced confinement or isolation or whatever you want to call it. For starters, I made a meatloaf. Hashtag vegan. No, I'm not vegan. I'm just kidding. Sorry. I made a meatloaf. I made an incredible recipe. I made also a recipe with bread as one of the main ingredients. Now, I'm somebody who doesn't eat a lot of bread, so I've been going through some changes. And so that was a first for me. And what an incredible recipe. And if you're interested in the recipe, reach out. It's a Jamie Oliver, both of them, the meatloaf and the bread thing, Jamie Oliver recipes. I have started running outside. I used to say that there is no way in hell that you will ever see me running outside. I won't even run for the bus. That has changed. Look how adaptable we are. Before the forced confinement, I was going to the gym and now I can't go to the gym. And my practice was either using the elliptical machine or using a treadmill. And now that I can't do that, and I'm not going to buy one of those, I decided I was going to try running outside. And you know what? It worked. I can do it. I didn't sort of disappear in a puff of smoke, auto-combust. It was fascinating. So I started running outside. Obviously, I've been teaching these group meditations, group yoga classes, virtually on a consistent basis. Gave this webinar that I spoke to you about on, managing isolation and creating structure. Today, I created the new intro and outro music myself for this podcast, and then use the editing software to put it all together so that, it's ready to, it's ready for you to hear, to sort of bookend this episode of the podcast with. But one of the coolest things that has happened, one of the firsts that has come out as a result of what is going on, is that I met up virtually with 21 guys that I went to high school with. Most of whom I haven't seen or interacted with since 1991. This thing happened so organically, where a couple of guys were, on Facebook Messenger exchanging messages, and they started adding people and finding people, and all of a sudden there was a high school reunion. It was so hardcore. I had never, ever thought that I would want to do that, simply because, for lack of a better expression, I went to the Dead Poets Society high school and couldn't wait to get out. So wasn't looking at all for any type of reunion. But you know what? It was amazing seeing these faces, catching up, hearing their stories, everybody in a different part of the world, everybody sort of just talking about this shared experience that we're going through. Was absolutely brilliant. I'm telling you all this because I want you to consider what the firsts are for you. And not necessarily the negative ones, but also the positive ones. Which ones are helpful? Which ones are contributing to, the maybe not the foreseeable future, but whatever, the phases that we have waiting for us. How are you changed by this? And how is that potentially a good thing? I want to know. I want you to reach out. I want you to email me, continue to reach out through whatever social media channel you use to contact me. But I want to hear about your firsts. I want to hear about how this situation has not necessarily just been doom and gloom, but has potentially been the start of something that is sustainable and helpful, and maybe adds more tools in your toolbox. Listen, I hope that, this episode has been somewhat helpful. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying healthy. If, you're not as healthy as you'd like to be, listen, I hope you're riding that out, and I hope you're just staying connected to good and connected to light and connected to hope and connected to us all. Because in this forced isolation, I have never felt a greater sense of community. Thank you all for being here, for being a part of this. I hope you enjoyed the new intro and outro music. I can't believe that I did that myself. Crazy. And listen, just stay well. Give this all a good think. And I will see you later for more episodes of this podcast in Season 2. This has been the Examine Life with Bran Levinson.